Races ahead and difficult decisions mean for us. I'll get the verdict from the Deputy Prime Minister, and after Donald Trump unveiled his peace plan for Gaza, saying it'll be a moment for the ages, I'll be talking to the Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper about that and the role of one Tony Blair in Palestine. So much to discuss. I have got a great guest list. Please join me after the news.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, the Prime Minister has warned voters they face a choice between decency and division in a speech to the Labour conference. Sir Keir Starmer has told delegates in Liverpool the road to national renewal will be long, but will lead to a Britain built for all. He targeted Reform's Nigel Farage and accused him of not liking Britain and labelled him the enemy of renewal.
He resorts to grievance. They want to turn this country, this proud, self-reliant country, into a competition of victims, saying to you, to working people, don't trust in each other. You can't fix this.
In response, Nigel Farage denied Sir Keir's claims of not caring about Britain and said the Prime Minister is unfit for office. Separately, a Labour promise for all young people to go to university has been scrapped. Sir Keir Starmer says it'll be replaced by the aim of 2/3 going on to do a degree or gold standard apprenticeships. You can hear the Prime Minister's interview with Nick Ferrari at breakfast here on LBC from 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. And one other story to bring you. President Trump says Hamas has between 3 and 4 days to respond to his peace plan for Gaza. Hamas negotiators are set to meet officials from Qatar and Turkey to discuss the 20-point proposal later tonight. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 50 points at 93.50. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.14. LBC weather dry, with large parts of England and Wales staying clear. Rain will continue, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Lows of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Dominic Ellis.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening from Liverpool. There were 2 important things in Keir Starmer's big speech today which I want you to remember. One of them expected and the other one a surprise. What was, I think, predictable was his attack on Nigel Farage, both for racism and talking the country down. But there was a real edge of genuine contempt in his voice. He now knows who the enemy is.
While I know nobody wants to hear this from a politician, the truth is we do all have a responsibility to change our country. There are limits to what the state can do on its own. In the end, we really are all in it together. Now, you will never hear that from the politicians of grievance.
What was much less expected, to me anyway, was his long list of ordinary people around the country doing good work in their communities, setting up girls' football teams or visiting the lonely, clearing up graffiti and the rest. Now, this might sound schmaltzy, but it's the first time I've heard a grown-up politician take on the online smearing of Britain as a disastrous, divided, crime-ridden cesspit. The Britain seen by millions of us on little clips on our phones and tablets, the Britain of race attacks and violence and desolation, is not the real country. Keir Starmer is not one of life's natural cheerer-uppers. If Jesus wanted Keir for a sunbeam, he would be grievously disappointed at the result. But this was his best attempt to cheer us up and remind us that we are a better country than all of that. And here was how he summarised the message.
If you say or imply that people cannot be English or British because of the colour of their skin, that mixed heritage families owe you an explanation, that people who've lived here for generations, raised their children here, built their lives here, working in our schools, our hospitals, running businesses, are our neighbours. If you say they should now be deported, then mark my words, we will fight you with everything we have, because you are the enemy of national renewal.
Starmer is not one of the modern world's great orators. He's no Kinnock, no Blair, no Obama. But this day was important. One little moan. I understand why they wanted lots of flags in the hall to be reclaimed from the extremists and the nationalists. But to give every cabinet minister and every MP a little union flag or an English one to wave made them look like a school bus party. It was cringe. Please, Labour, don't do this again. Well, one of the things we always ask at this point in the day is how did it go down in the hall? And by that we really mean among the rest of the Labour Party and in particular the ministers. And luckily I am joined now by Aggie, LBC's political correspondent, minus a little plastic flag. We're sitting here as grown-up, mature people without flags, Aggie. You've been talking to people. What have they been telling you?
I've been talking to people, and I think, Andrew, the thing that everybody was saying before this conference, before this speech, was this really could be make or break. People wanted to see a few different things from the Prime Minister today. I think they wanted positivity, they wanted a bit of a vision, they wanted to understand what drove him. And I think he was able to do at least most of that, even if, as you say, it wasn't delivered in the most, beautiful way possible. So after the speech, I ran up to the front of the stage and grabbed a load of cabinet ministers and asked what they thought of the speech and whether or not Keir Starmer pulled off what they wanted.
Yeah, look, I think he made a really big pitch to the country about the sort of country we're trying to build, the country that we believe in, a Britain that is built for everybody, that we see a home here for people.
I thought it was a great speech. I've been around this a long time. These ups and downs come and go, but what matters is the vision of the future and driving towards that, and I thought Keir laid that out brilliantly today.
So yes or no, enough to change the narrative?
Absolutely.
And left, he meant, Corbyn, the Greens, these other parties that, they seem to believe there's a magic money tree out there that you can just shake it and all the goods will fall to earth. Well, Liz Truss tried that. We saw what that did to the economy. The country will have a clear choice at the next election. It will be the renewal and change that is already happening with Labour. It will be clearer by the next election, or what Farage is offering, which is decline and division and pitting neighbours on the same street against each other.
So
that's not Britain.
Are Jeremy Corbyn and Zach Balansky snake oil salesmen?
They are, absolutely, yes.
So we know what the fight is, we know what the electoral challenge ahead is. We're focused on renewing our country. That's what the speech was about, but we're taking the fight to reform too.
So a load of cabinet ministers there reacting after Sir Keir Starmer's speech. And I think one of the key questions that I asked them, and one of the key questions being asked and answered today around conference, is whether or not Keir Starmer did enough to change the narrative, whether or not he is safe now. And I think the consensus is yes, at least until the next crisis.
At least until the next crisis. Well, I'm joined now by one of the most senior politicians in the government, the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, one of the great survivors in Labour politics, if you don't mind me saying so. Yvette, let's pick up with Aggie's question there.
Kind of you, Andrew. Are you just saying I'm getting on a bit?
I would say nothing like that, as you know, Yvette. Goodness me. Let me ask you, effectively, Aggie's question. Is this a new direction, a new tone from the Labour Party we're hearing at this conference?
So I think it was a very powerful speech from Keir Starmer. It was certainly a very patriotic speech, very much about his vision of a future of Britain, renewing Britain, but very much drawing on those same things that he has talked about in the past, about common decency, about respect, and about valuing people, whether he's talking about the gold standard apprenticeships or, all of those sorts of things, really valuing working class people and doing jobs, working really hard across the country and things like that. So I think there were many of the things you've heard Keir talk about before, but really strongly setting it out as this is a choice for Britain. Do we come together around those values, renew the country, or do we go down a track which is very divisive and running the country down?
And really on that theme, I completely understand why you would want to reclaim the flag and you'd want all those flags fluttering in the hall. But did it not feel a little bit embarrassing, a little bit cringe for you as a cabinet minister and the rest of them sitting there with your little flags during the speech?
Oh, so quite the opposite. So we have.
Liked it.
I'm a big flag fan. So when we have a summer we have a summer barbecue every year, and we really put up the flags everywhere. We will have the Union Jack bunting, we'll have the St George's flags, we'll have the Yorkshire Rose flags. We've actually even got some Yorkshire tea bunting, but that is probably taking it a little bit too far.
I'm going to send Emily Thornbury round to see you.
Yeah, the flag, we've still got the Union Jack bunting still over our garden shed that we didn't manage to take down. But so I think it's a good way. And look, as Foreign Secretary, so much of what I do is about flying the flag abroad, literally. And that flag means something across the world. It means decency. It means fairness. It means playing by the rules. It means also being trusted partners on the diplomatic stage that also gets us investment back in the UK. So it means something.
I am going to come on to your role as Foreign Secretary, as you would expect, for obvious reasons, in a moment. But just before I do, I think an awful lot of people at home listening to the speech would have been concerned, actually not just that speech, but earlier speeches, by the constant references to really hard decisions and difficult things ahead. Let me read you what the Prime Minister said. He said, talking of the path of renewal, he said, it's long, it's difficult, it requires decisions that are not cost-free or easy, decisions that will not always be comfortable for our party. What was he talking about?
So we've already had to take difficult decisions, for example, switching funding from the aid budget to the defence budget because of the significant real security challenges that we now face, the global uncertainty, the issues whether it's around Ukraine and NATO and so on.
So that's in the past. There's more to come.
Yeah, but those decisions are still being implemented. So there are always difficult decisions. You've got to make choices in government, and sometimes I don't think people appreciate being told that anything and everything is possible and there's no difficult choices and it's all a sort of fantasy world. I think people want ministers to level with them about things.
I get that. I just wondered whether it was a nod to the idea you're going to have to return to the welfare budget, which is growing and growing and growing, whether it's a nod to the fact you're going to have much, much tougher issues on migration and law coming ahead, those kinds of things.
Well, so on some of the issues around the budget, obviously those are matters for the Chancellor. If you think about some of the migration issues that we've been talking about, we've already set out the way in which we need the stronger controls on legal migration and also the stronger proposals we've set forward on the returns to France, for example, for illegal migration of boats
you're
and
not
expanding
expecting
those.
a further wave of changes to come?
Well, some of the work I'd done as Home Secretary that Shabana's now taking forward was all about, for example, setting out new reforms to the asylum system. We set out some of those over the summer. We'll set out further ones in future. So those are the sorts of things we do need to do, but there is a difference. So whilst we think there are stronger controls that are needed, we need to deal with illegal migration, we need to increase returns. What we won't sign up to is this idea that people who have been living in the UK for decades, who have legal rights to be in the UK because of the way they've contributed and been part of, for example, working for our National Health Service,
the law, paid their taxes, all of that.
And they should be suddenly returned and suddenly deported, which is what Reform have been putting forward.
We got that. We got that message loud and clear. One very final point on domestic policy, if you don't mind. The two-child benefit cap. There are reports tonight that is going to be abolished in the budget. Would you be pleased if that was the case?
So we're expecting a new child poverty task force to report shortly to set out some of the real serious issues we face, and obviously you wouldn't expect me to comment on anything in the budget, but you did hear strong words from the Prime Minister today about child poverty. It's a deeply divided issue in our country and we do need to tackle it. It's why we're doing free breakfast clubs and expanding free meals to do that as well.
Well, let me turn to the big foreign affairs story of the day, which is, of course, what Donald Trump, his big new Gaza plan, he's described it as bold and intelligent. Is this a real plan, do you think?
I think this is a very serious plan. We strongly support the US initiative to get an end to the war and suffering in Gaza. We need a ceasefire, we need the hostages released and also the restoration of humanitarian aid. But this is only going to be possible if we've also got a proper plan for a just and lasting peace. So we've put forward proposals, Arab states have been putting forward proposals, we've been working with other countries all through the summer and certainly at the UN General Assembly last week. A lot of that work underway, and it's crucial, I think, that this plan is now supported and developed. A lot of work to do on it still, but this is a really important moment.
Well, certainly the American president thinks so. Let's just hear him overnight talking about it.
My plan calls for the creation of a new international oversight body, the Board of Peace, we call it, the Board of Peace, sort of a beautiful name, the board. And we'll have a board, and one of the people that wants to be on the board is the UK former Prime Minister, Tony Blair. Good man, very good man.
Do you understand what the former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, very good man, is going to do?
So the President's just put forward this proposal. It's one of 20 points, is to have effectively an international oversight board that would then oversee actually the much more detailed work in Gaza, to have a transition, and that would be a transition to the Palestinian Authority. What the President's put forward, Tony Blair is one of the people to be on it, and we're expecting it to also include others, leaders and ex-leaders. But a lot of these things are still being developed and still being worked through, and so that will be part of the negotiations, including with Arab states who've been very heavily involved, because it needs to have broad brush support.
You would welcome Tony Blair's involvement?
Well, look, he's somebody who's obviously been previously the Middle East envoy, and also, as you'll know, had a lot of work experience in the Good Friday Agreement as well. But we are expecting it to also involve other leaders and ex-leaders as part of it.
As has been pointed out already, the record in the Middle East wasn't entirely unspotted.
So we know that this whole process is going to need to involve a very broad range of people, and the most crucial thing is that this has widespread support, and that includes from the Arab states, who we've been working very closely with and having a lot of discussions with. Obviously we've got a set of proposals from President Trump, but it's really important those are now taken forward.
Now, right at the moment, clearly the big question is how Hamas responds to it. They said they're going to look at it seriously, but isn't the case their real choice is sign this or annihilation?
There's no military solution to this situation that works. There's none. And
so when President Trump said he'll let the Israelis do what they have to do, which seemed to be, kill everybody, that is something that the British government would still resist.
No, we don't. That's right. We don't believe there is any military solution that works. We think that will make things not only escalate the humanitarian crisis, but will also make it harder to get hostages released as well, and certainly won't deliver security for either Israelis or for Palestinians. So that's why we're strongly supporting this peace initiative. It's why it's so important that everyone comes around this peace initiative in order to get an end to the war and the suffering. This has gone on too long. We have just seen devastating consequences for children in Gaza. We also have hostages who are still being held. It's horrendous what is still happening. We need to bring an end to it.
There are many problems still ahead, and one of them is the British government has recognised a Palestinian state, but Benjamin Netanyahu, asked about a two-state solution, replied, absolutely not. It's not written into the agreement. Given that, don't the Israelis have to move in a major way to let this happen?
Well, the proposal set out, the plan set out by President Trump, does include statehood for Palestine is part of it, as referred to as part of it. We have recognised the state of Palestine. For a very long time, the UK government has talked about a two-state solution, but only recognised one state. That's changed now. We have made the historic decision to recognise the state of Palestine. And interestingly, I think it's that process around recognition is also what then helped to get the Arab League and Arab countries to then agree that Hamas must play no role in the future of Palestine or of Gaza. So these things have been part of contributing to where we've got to now. There is a long way to go, though.
There is a long way to go. Any sign at all, any whisper of a suggestion of a hint that the Americans might be beginning to move on the question of statehood?
Well, it is referred to in this 20-point plan. That is really important. That is a change. Some of the other things that are really important in it, that are things we've pushed for, is in returning to UN agencies being able to distribute aid in Gaza. That's incredibly important. The current aid distribution is not working and is really damaging. So there's a series of things, recognising the role for the Palestinian Authority.
I was going to ask you about that, because they would move in and effectively, eventually take over control of Gaza as well. Do you think the Palestinian Authority is in a position, is capable of doing that kind of role at the moment?
Well, it needs further reforms, and I've spoken to President Abbas on the Palestinian Authority about the reforms that are needed. We know that there's a lot of work there still to do and a lot of work being done with them, and so that's why there are transitional arrangements being proposed for Gaza while those reforms take place on the Palestinian Authority. But the really important thing is Palestine needs to be run by Palestinians, not by Hamas. Everyone has agreed they must play no role, but it does need to be run by Palestinians.
Well, You're very new as Foreign Secretary, but I have to say you sounded like a very experienced Foreign Secretary.
It's been a very busy few weeks.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Yvette Cooper. Now, coming up, we're going to get the latest on the Middle East as the world waits to get Hamas's reaction, as we've just been discussing, to the peace deal. You are listening to Tonight with Andrew Marr, and the time now is 6:19.
The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Tomorrow morning from 7. LB. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:21. All eyes are on Hamas as the world waits to hear its reaction to President Trump's Gaza peace deal. Could this really be the end of the slaughter? Someone with huge experience in pursuing peace in the region is Tor Wennesland, the former UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process and the UN representative to the Palestinian Authority. Tor, thank you very much indeed for joining the programme tonight. Can I start by asking you, frankly, whether you think this is a serious proposal that's going to go somewhere?
It is a very serious proposal. It is a full support from the U.S. administration and the U.S. president, and it is widely supported from the Arab world and from the Europeans and other international. So this is superbly serious, but it is a very difficult proposal to implement. And it won't work unless it gets properly started. And getting it properly started is the difficult one. Because here, it's not only a question of releasing hostages in exchange for prisoners. That in itself is a very complicated thing to do, and it requires massive preparations and logistics. Secondly, it's a question of withdrawal of Israeli army. And third thing is to beef up the humanitarian delivery. These three elements need to come in a package and need to be properly coordinated. Unless that is happening, we don't have any way to go on the other elements in this plan. And they're very
I don't want to sound too sort of pessimistic too early, but what the Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, said about the statehood issue and about what's going to happen in Gaza did not sound to me as if he was really signed up to a major change.
No, I agree to that. But he was basically holding his previous positions. And even if Trump got him to say that he had signed on to it, I don't think he left that impression in his statement. No. And for reasons we know. I mean, he has to return to a backyard and a government that is not in full support of these key elements of statehood and withdrawal from Gaza. And there is another point, and that has to do with the connection with what's going on at the West Bank. It is a non-starter for any Arab country, and in particular those who signed on to the normalization agreement under Trump 1, to see that the foothold of the Israeli settlers is being expanded at the West Bank.
absolutely crucial.
So if that's happening, the thing is off the table, and the support from the Arabs would be off the table.
That's obviously one of the big problems here. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier on, you were the UN representative to the Palestinian Authority, who under this proposal would eventually take control of Gaza as well. Yvette Cooper, our Foreign Secretary, was just suggesting that the Palestinian Authority is not ready for that role yet. Do you agree?
Well, the Palestinian Authority needs broad support from the international community on capacity. It needs broad support, mainly, I think, from the Arab world when it comes to handling security issues on the ground and assure safe delivery on humanitarian goods. And it needs broad support also to the structure of governance, but they need to be in at an early stage. And I'm a little bit worried that may not happen. And beware of one thing. We have had a long period of Hamas rule in Gaza since 2007. There has been an attempt to split the Gaza from the West Bank, and it's very important that any new international structure is not underpinning that split and not allowing the Palestinian Authority to play its right role in this.
I think that's very, very important. So, in the end, a very important day, but a huge way to go. Tor Wennesland, thank you so much for talking to LBC tonight. Now, let's go back to the conference hall where we are sitting. One line that ministers have been out to deliver over the last few days is that the controversial reform policy to scrap indefinite leave to remain is racist. Well, Nigel Farage came out to respond to that this afternoon, and he wasn't entirely impressed. Our political editor, Natasha Clark, can tell us more. Natasha.
Yes, Andrew, and you really heard Keir Starmer's anger there in the hall today during that major conference speech, didn't you? He absolutely threw every insult under the sun, calling him, Nigel Farage, a snake oil salesman. He's determined to tear the country apart. As you said, his policies are racist. He's a politician who lied to the country, walked away after Brexit, equivocated on Ukraine, and spends his time talking Britain down, and he doesn't even like it. He promised to fight Nigel Farage and his policies about immigration with everything he's got. That got a huge applause from the room. But as you said, Nigel Farage well and truly hit back this evening. He said that now his party, his campaigners are fearing for their safety, accusing the Prime Minister of whipping up violence against him. He said after Charlie Kirk's murder in the US, he is now very worried. So a huge row with reform, exactly what the Prime Minister wanted. And actually in the last few minutes I've got another response from Nigel Farage saying we will teach Keir Starmer a lesson next May that British political history will never forget. I am now, as a result of this week and the abuse he has heaped upon our supporters and voters, more determined than ever. So Nigel Farage very much fighting back. Labour insiders very happy, I'm told, with how the speech went down. But Andrew, others I'm speaking to really worried that actually this really hard line on the Reform Party may backfire. And we've also just been speaking in the last few minutes to Graham Stringer, a backbench Labour MP. He is really worried that the party are going too far on immigration. He joins Thangam Debonair, who said the same thing yesterday. One source told me this is a really tricky line for us on racism. We hope it doesn't backfire. Another said they are concerned that it could lead to supporters of reform or those who are attracted to him thinking that the Prime Minister thinks that they are racist. So a very, very difficult distinction to draw. The Prime Minister obviously wants to have that fight, but we're really 4 years around from an election. Is this going to make a difference in the polls? It's what we're going to be talking about, I'm quite sure, for the next year at least, because there's lots more proposals, I'm sure, to come from the Labour Party. And we've had, hints of that. There's tougher stuff even still to come. And yet, how you deliver that message, ensuring that you are being tough without in any sense sounding like reform, is really difficult. Let me ask you about one other issue, because we're talking really about the aftershocks of the conference speeches at the moment. The other thing that's being talked about a lot tonight is the two-child benefit cap. And you heard Yvette Cooper elegantly avoiding my question as to whether she would be pleased to see it lifted. But of course, most people in the hall would be delighted to see it lifted. Do you think it's going to happen in the budget? I do. And as we discussed this last week, Andrew, the idea that the Prime Minister might nod to the idea that he is going to lift the benefit cap, it very much seems nailed on from everybody that I've been speaking to in government that this is going to happen. It's just a matter of how it happens and when it happens. And tonight there are fresh reports out that the Chancellor is considering a tapering system for the two-child benefit cap. So basically what this would mean is if people had more children than 2 children, which is what it's capped at the moment, it would mean you could get extra benefits for those children, but eventually hopefully that would then taper down. So the more children
the more you
have,
have, the fewer benefits you get for each one.
Exactly. So firstly, this will be good news for Rachel Reeves because it's less than the £3.5 billion it's going to take to completely raise the cap. And secondly, this is good for the right of the party. Many people believe that this cap is very, very popular. Lots of polling suggests that the British public think it's actually good and should stay in place. And this is actually a good argument for them to say, well, actually, we are still, being fiscal, we're being responsible, we're still rewarding people in this way, and also not just giving out handouts to people who have as many children as they can.
Really, really interesting. Natasha, as ever, thank you so much for coming and explaining it all to me. Now, there wasn't just one leadership speech today. I thought there was another speaker who many people are now saying sounded very much like a future Prime Minister. So who was that? Find out who it was next. For the time now, 6:29, and Dominic Ellis has your news headlines.
The Prime Minister has warned Britain is facing a defining choice between decency and division. Speaking at Labour's party conference in Liverpool, Sir Keir Starmer said it was a fight for the very soul of the country. He renewed his attack on Nigel Farage, saying he wants to stir the pot of division because it suits Reform UK's interests. In response, Mr Farage labelled Sir Keir's speech an absolute disgrace and accused him of being unfit for Downing Street. And the Foreign Secretary has told LBC that President Trump's peace plan is an important and serious moment for Gaza. Yvette Cooper told Tonight with Andrew Marr it'll only be possible, though, if there's a proper proposal for just and lasting peace. Donald Trump has set a new deadline of between 3 and 4 days for Hamas negotiators to decide on their response. LBC weather dry for large parts of England and Wales. Rain will continue for Scotland and Northern Ireland through the evening. Lows of 7 degrees.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. If you thought he was unpopular,
it is time to return to those old core values. Time to get back to basics, to self-discipline and respect for the law.
And she was despised.
I have only one thing to say. You turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
This one's gone even further.
There's a lot we've achieved, but we've got to do more. We inherited a complete mess.
The current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is the most unpopular Prime Minister on polling record, as his stewardship is linked to the Titanic. What can he do to stop it hitting the rocks? Join me, Nick Ferrari, at breakfast as I speak with the Prime Minister from Labour's party conference in Liverpool. Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio, on Global Player, and the LBC. Or over. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:33. The Prime Minister got through his set speech conference largely unscathed this afternoon after days of criticism and questions being asked about his future as Prime Minister. But there was another speech in the auditorium earlier in the day that really got the crowd going. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. I discussed this with the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, earlier this afternoon, but we started with his thoughts on Keir Starmer's performance. Did he think that we had seen a new Prime Minister in any sense this afternoon?
Well, I thought that it was unusual for a Labour leader's speech in the 27 years I've been coming to party conference, and that's because he barely referred to the Conservatives. This was Keir Starmer squaring up to reform, calling them out for what they are, calling out the grievance, calling out the division, articulating a passionate story of where he's from and why he has the values he has. And I thought the thread of renewal running through the speech worked. And there were, the exciting announcements around further education and apprenticeships and around the NHS Online landed well in the audience, of course, but I think will land well with the public.
Well, thinking about the general public, we've heard from him, we've heard from Shabana, we've heard from Rachel Reeves, warnings to the Labour Party. There is stuff coming that you will not like. There are very, very difficult and hard decisions ahead. What kind of things are we talking about? Because a lot of people at home will be thinking, eek.
For Shabana's speech, and she has been crystal clear that, you don't win the permission to be heard unless you are dealing with the migration issue.
Can I just jump in there? Do you think that if you can't secure the borders, if you can't deal with the migration issue, you can't win the election either?
It's about being heard by the public on the number 2 issue that they raise after cost of living. And I think that means that we've got to be clear with European partners, particularly around aspects of our norms around human rights that are being abused. And, we're hearing from colleagues in Denmark, in Italy, in Germany, that these are issues that they're up for discussing.
It's often said about the Keir Starmer government, the big problem is we don't really know who you're for, or what you're against. In a sense, has Nigel Farage done the party and done Keir Starmer a favour by making it clear who the real enemy is and given us a sharper cutting edge than we've seen before?
Well, he's reacted quite badly to the speech. He says, why am I being mentioned so many times? Look, but the truth is, scrutiny is important. And holding up his policies to the light is important. He wants a national insurance scheme for the NHS, which is basically charging you. He wants to slash taxes in the way that Liz Truss did. Well, expect to run on the pound and the bond markets to wobble if that's the case. He says that even though you might have leave to remain in this country, you may have been here for a generation with your children. Actually, if you're from Nigeria or India, presumably off you go. Holding that up to the light, really asking the public and the media to look closely at it, I think, will be tough for Nigel Farage. And also, not just that, but actually, who's Nigel Farage's team? Because the public tend to start focusing not just on the individual, but also the team of people who might be running the NHS, might be running the economy. And I think that Nigel will find that testing.
You mentioned the bond markets just now, David. I'm being told by the Treasury that the single intervention by your good friend and colleague Andy Burnham on the subject of let's ignore the bond markets cost the British taxpayer £1.75 billion in extra borrowing costs. How much damage do you think the Andy Burnham moment has done to the party?
Well, I think that recognising that the Conservatives are badly split at the moment, most people think Robert Jenrick wants Kemi Badenoch's job, recognising that one of Nigel Farage's problems is usually when others start to circle, he's not very much of a team player. We've got to remain united. And I think we have seen also in the last 48 hours, the party want to unite. And I'm pleased that Andy Burnham has said, look, Keir Starmer's the right person to lead. And sort of period which has not been very helpful or conducive, frankly, to a serious party of government.
I think it's hard to say at a party conference whether it's come to an end or not. I mean, you've got the budget ahead, which is clearly going to be a tax raising and very, very difficult budget for the party. And then you've got all those elections coming next year. Now, you as Deputy Prime Minister have a kind of responsibility for the politics now. How are you going to handle that period?
Well, on the first one, the budget, I thought it was important that Keir Starmer rules. It's important for the stability and the credibility of the UK economy, notwithstanding the decisions that clearly Rachel Reeves will have to make once we get that OBR forecast and she settles on her budget. The second, of course, the local elections. I was also pleased to get a sense that we will be fighting for every vote, that every vote in Wales, every vote in Scotland, and actually in London, where the Greens, the Lib Dems are coming into view, as well as Reform, will be very, very important indeed. And in the end, you've got to have an upbeat party to meet that challenge. If you're deflated and your members don't want to knock on doors, you're in trouble. And so the local elections in May will be an important test, without doubt.
Well, let's bring together those two themes of elections and the party and ask you, as Deputy Prime Minister, how you will handle, what your demeanour will be towards Lucy Powell if she wins the deputy leadership.
Look, Lucy's a colleague that I have been with in Cabinet for the last 14 months. She's a very dear colleague. I've known her for many, many years. And of course, I would expect, if she does win the contest, to be deputy leader of the party, to work with her extremely closely. We have done before, we will do again.
And would you expect her, as deputy leader of the Labour Party, to be given a government job or be offered a government job?
That must ultimately be a decision for the Prime Minister. He has to have a cabinet of all the talents, and he will make that determination. So that's a matter for him.
Okay, but you and she can have a good and warm relationship.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
She's a class act.
Sticking with the leadership issue, second leadership speech, a speech by a future leader. Now, saving your presence, because I'm sure everybody in the Cabinet thinks one day it could be me, but I thought that Wes Streeting gave an extraordinarily impressive and a speech the Labour Party seemed to absolutely adore. Do you see him as a potential future Prime Minister?
Wes Streeting is without doubt a rising star of the Labour Party, and I think alongside Bridget Phillipson and Shabana represents the future of the Labour Party, and obviously a different generation to me. And so, I think he's doing an incredible job in health. I saw Shabana's speech, which I thought was very erudite. I haven't seen Wes's speech, but I have heard the mutterings on the conference floor about how good it was, so I shall be watching it on the way back to London a little later on today.
I think it's well worth a watch. There was an extraordinary moment in it when he said, he was talking about social care, and he said, and this is all the achievement, the heritage of a proud working class woman who fought her way all the way up to cabinet, and she's called Angela Rayner, and the whole crowd, the whole hall went bonkers. And he then said, Angela, we need you back. I don't know if he had the Prime Minister's imprimatur to say that. Nonetheless, it was quite a moment. Do you think Angela's going to come back?
Well, do
you want her back?
I also thanked Angela. I think she was a big figure. I'd like to see her back in time. She's a working class hero. She will always be a working class hero. And like John Prescott, plays a big role in the Labour movement.
And it didn't seem to a lot of people like it was a capital offence first time round for her, as it were. She's been very quiet throughout conference. She hasn't been seen or anything. Do you think quite soon she can work her way back?
Well, politics is an up and down business. I've been at it for 25 years in public life. My experience is, if people generally look favourably on the circumstances in which you step back, there is an opportunity these days to step forward again, and I fully expect Angela Rayner to continue to be a force in the Labour Party.
Oh, we'll see. Listen, for now, David Lammy, thank you very, very much indeed for coming in and talking to LBC.
Thank you.
Now, as the conference stands are disassembled and the warm white wine runs dry and run-down hacks trudge back home again, I'm going to be looking back on what has been a very important, very dramatic few days for the government here in Liverpool, with Gabriel Pogrund, the Whitehall editor of the Sunday Times, Tom Baldwin, the biographer of Keir Starmer, and Richard Bergen, the Labour MP for Leeds East. Time now, 6:43.
Coming up at 7, Ian Dale leading Britain's conversation. Next on LBC.
And Big Biscuit only.
Leading Britain's Conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
It's 6:45. It has been such an interesting conference, but one of the things that we haven't really talked about is the underlying politics around where the Prime Minister's going, what's happening inside the Cabinet. Also very, very interesting. So I'm going to conclude this by talking first of all to Gabriel Pogrund, who is not only a senior figure on the Sunday Times these days, but is also the co-author of a really interesting book, Get In, about Keir Starmer and, of course, Morgan McSweeney, the Irishman, as you call him in the book, Gabriel. It's no secret that Morgan McSweeney has lost quite a few of his lieutenants around Downing Street in the last few days, and I'm really interested in what's going on underneath the bonnet, as it were, because there is a perception that bit by bit, as the Starmerite or McSweeney project loses people, the Tony Blair project is moving in. The Tony Blair Institute is, as it were, a kind of Svengali figure behind this government. Tell me whether you agree with that.
I think it's a really interesting kind of subtle point, and let me just say one thing first. I mean, you talked about Mr. McSweeney. When he was positioning Starmer for the Labour leadership, he had this way of slicing and dicing the membership. He referred to instrumentalists, idealists and ideologues, basically the Blairites, people that want a slightly nicer world, and the Corbynites. Well, Starmer and Blair are actually from different traditions. I mean, Blair is the ultimate instrumentalist, and Starmer is an idealist in that he, his tradition and the human rights world, and he wants to give effect to a slightly nicer world. So they're different traditions and different personalities.
So we're talking obviously about the speech today, but I thought there were three moments which seemed to me to be slightly Keir Starmer slapping back towards Tony Blair. One, he mentioned the Gaza peace deal, but didn't mention Tony Blair's involvement in any of that.
Viceroy Blair.
What did I say?
No, I just referred to him as Viceroy Blair.
Viceroy Blair, or Prince Blair of Gaza, I think is the official title. So he didn't refer to him then, and then he had a real go at globalisation and the naivety of globalisation. Well, that was the Blair era. And then finally he said, I don't like this idea that the way that we judge our education system is whether 50% of people end up going to university. That's wrong. We should be looking at further education and skills training and all the rest of it. And again, that was a Tony Blair idea. And I just wonder, in a world where we've got ID cards coming in, we've got Tony Blair people still all around Downing Street, Tim Allen and others, there was a slight pushback by the Prime Minister saying, in a subtle way, I am not Tony Blair's stooge.
I will say one thing, conspicuous by its absence was ID cards. I thought it was fascinating. It's a massive policy. It was announced, only about 96 hours ago. It didn't feature once, and I have got more than a whiff over the last couple of days of that policy. Whether it eventually comes to pass seems to be the subject of ongoing internal discussion.
Are you suggesting by any chance that it wasn't properly cooked, wasn't properly prepared before it was launched?
Well, I mean, you talk about two-child benefit cap, winter fuel payments. This government has form when it comes to policies which haven't. The argumentation often follows the announcement. I think that may apply in this case too.
I mean, there is a really, I'll come to you in a moment, Richard, there is a really, really interesting conversation going on at Cabinet level as to whether this government has proper conversations inside Cabinet about the things they're launching, whether it's the things we've been talking about or recognising Palestine. In other words, looking at, the pushback that's going to happen, the detail, all of that is not being subjected to a really rigorous Cabinet level fight or argument, as it would have been under previous governments, and we may be all paying the penalty for that.
Well, I think that paradigm absolutely applies to, for instance, one of the questions which will determine the next chapter of this government, Starmer's own position on the European Convention on Human Rights. I mean, I've been speaking to a lot of people that it's sort of almost a fact. Shabana Mahmood is clearly in a much harder and sharper place on it than the Attorney General, Richard Hermer. But when people in Cabinet and around Cabinet talk about it, they say, well, essentially at some point in time somebody's going to present a menu of options to Keir, and he, having been sort of absent from the argument and the debate, will prevail in a particular direction. But it's quite unusual. It's not like with Blair, you talk about comparing and contrasting the two. Blair was an architect of his own project and was an instigator of it.
And he always liked an argument. Whatever you thought of Tony Blair, he would go into a room and be delighted if there was a proper argument to be had. Richard Bergen, I feel slightly guilty so far the last couple of days. We haven't heard from the Labour left really much on the way the conference has gone. So before we go any further, what did you make of the conference so far, and what have you made of the speech?
Well, the fringe meetings have been
very interesting. I've just come from the Socialist Campaign Group of Labour MPs fringe meeting, which was...
There's a surprise.
Yeah, there's a surprise, which was very well attended. Some union general secretaries were there as well. And in that meeting, we were reflecting upon the conference, but also upon Keir Starmer's speech. Obviously, as you'd expect, given my position on Gaza, and also given my firm belief in party democracy, I was really pleased with the motion being passed yesterday. The party leadership fought tooth and nail to keep the motion off the conference floor.
This is the one that refers to genocide.
That's right, and demands widespread sanctions on Israel. They tried by hook or by crook to avoid it getting onto the conference floor. CLP delegates and trade unions worked together. It got to the conference floor. They then put up a kind of stooge motion, which was meant to scupper it, and then they picked a choice of speakers which didn't reflect the balance of support in the hall for different views on this matter, and yet it was still passed. It was really significant that the Labour Party conference passed a policy which recognises that there's a genocide taking place in Gaza and calls for widespread sanctions. More widely, Keir Starmer's speech today, I did very much welcome the fact that he took head-on Nigel Farage's policy in relation to deportation of people who are our long-standing friends, neighbours and work colleagues. He said that's a racist, immoral policy. I thought that was a very important moment. But
he's found his voice on that, hasn't he?
Yeah, I thought he spoke with passion about the kind of country that he wants to see, but we also need policies, and I was surprised. I think it was very much a values-based speech. I was expecting more policy announcements within it. There had been rumours that he was going to announce the lifting of the two-child benefit cap.
There are further rumours tonight that that is going to be in the budget.
Okay, and we would of course welcome that, and I'd certainly welcome it, having been suspended from the PLP for 6 months for voting to add that to the government's programme. But another word that was missing from the Prime Minister's speech today was redistribution. The best way for us to beat reform and stop a situation where we end up with the first far-right government in our country's history, in my view, is to deliver on the cost of living crisis. And we can beat reform, not on their territory, not by triangulating with reform, but by delivering on lifting living standards. And I don't think you can do that without redistribution. He talked about growth. He actually ruled out a wealth tax. Now, I've long campaigned for a wealth tax. I didn't expect the Prime Minister to announce a wealth tax today, but I was very surprised to hear him rule one out. I think that's a mistake. I think that in the budget, the leadership is going to have to grasp the necessary nettle of redistribution in order to really turn things round, because May's elections are looming and we need a real upsurge in the polls if we're going to, after next May, feel confident that we can prevent a reform government, prevent what happened in the USA and what happened in Italy happening here.
Well, it's a very, very exciting place to be, because as I'm talking, my panel is growing minute by minute by minute, and we've just been joined by Tom Baldwin, who is, of course, Keir Starmer's biographer, and some people hint a voice in Keir Starmer's ear quite a lot. Tom, the caricature, I'm going to come to this straight away since you're here. Caricature, at the moment going the gossip round, is that there are two people that he's listening to really closely. One is Morgan McSweeney, who wants to move him in the blue Labour direction a bit more to his right, and the other is you, pulling him in the other direction. Have you got your hands round one of Keir Starmer's ears, and are you tugging him?
No, not at all. I take absolutely no credit for what I thought was a great speech today. I thought what the Keir Starmer we saw today was the Keir Starmer I know. A decent, tolerant, actually passionate man, and we just haven't seen that enough. And, his aides were worried all week that he might lose his voice. At one point he ate a whole packet of
struggling a little bit at the beginning, I thought.
Yeah, he ate a whole packet of pastilles one night this week. But he didn't lose his voice, he found it today. Calling Farage out for a racist policy which would rip this country apart, that was, not many of his speeches send the hairs on the back of my neck up. Yeah, that was a big moment, but he did today. He really did. And look, there are all kinds of strategic dilemmas on this. I mean, is the country broken, or is it, is it something worth saving from Farage? There are things there's lots of problems they've got with this. How do you attack Farage without having a go at Donald Trump? But I tell you what, we're still buried up to our necks in the brown stuff. but we've turned and we're facing in a better direction now because they've resolved one big thing, which is how do you attack Farage? Not as the same old Tories, not as some sort of an irrelevance or passing fancy. He's a threat to the things that we hold most dear in this country. That's a battle for the heart and soul of the country. And Keir Starmer's much, much more comfortable in that place than rather than this sort of defensive, agonised crouch that he's been in too often.
I kind of agree with that. I don't know if you do as well, Gabriel. We haven't brought you in for a moment.
Well, I will say, I mean, nobody knows Keir in the fourth estate better than Tom, and I think I from afar felt the same, that was authentic Keir. It came to him naturally. He felt able to, that critique of reform as being, the dividers rather than the decent, that clearly came from the heart. I wonder in terms of, I do wonder where he goes with this word racist. I mean, there's sort of echoes of Clinton's basket of deplorables. Is he characterising all of them? I mean, he said he isn't, but I can see exactly how Reform are going to use that as a cudgel now. But the point is that
sometimes you have to have the argument, though, don't you? If that's what you think, sometimes you have to say what you think.
Absolutely, and I thought, Richard was referring to the fact that it was values-driven, relatively light on policy. I thought it was interesting that Shabana Mahmood's position on indefinite leave to remain, what she was talking about, contribution, being eligible for citizenship only on the basis of being a net addition to the UK. I mean, that was all on the cutting room floor. This was much more of a political critique of reform.
I'd like to ask you all about one other aspect of the speech, actually, I started the show with, but I haven't talked about, which was we had this long passage about all the people around the country doing good in their communities, clearing graffiti, looking after lonely older people, setting up girls' football clubs, whatever it might be. And he said, this is the real Britain. And I do worry that we pick up our little mobile phones or our tablets and we see endless little films pushed around by the far right, often created by American algorithms, suggesting that this country is just a cesspit of violence and racism and street crime, and everything is falling apart. This is the first time I think I have heard a grown-up politician address directly that question. Richard?
I think that was an important part of the speech, and when I think about my own constituency, it's the kind of thing that really warms your heart and makes you feel proud to live in your own community. People who are doing good things for other people in their community. I think that's important because that's contrasting the decency of the vast majority with the kind of policy that Keir Starmer quite rightly called out as racist when he's talking about deporting people from our own communities who are very much part of the fabric of our community. So I think it did showcase some of the best things in our civic society.
Tom, Keir is not a natural sunbeam or cheerer-upper, generally speaking, I think we can agree. But this was his attempt to say to the country, do you know what, it's not that bad, you're not broken, it's not all over. And that is presumably because he thinks that those people who feel it is all over think, well, in that case we might as well go to reform, we might as well go to an extreme.
Look, it was interesting because a lot of the first part of the speech was actually pitched at that story of decline. He was talking about how the working class have had a really tough time. But the second half was to say, look, there's also something which we need to fight to save. There's 70% of this country who do not want Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. That stretches from One Nation Tories to Greens to people who might vote for Jeremy Corbyn to the SNP to Plaid Cymru. If he can mobilise a progressive coalition, they may not love everything about this government, may not love everything about him, but so much is at stake now. And I think what he's done is he said, this matters. This is who I am, this is what our country is, and I'm going to fight for it. And it's a better place than he was before.
I think we can all agree that this is a really important political moment. Thank you all very, very much indeed. We are out of time, I said. It's been a fantastic conference. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you'd like them. You can pause, you can rewind live radio, and you can listen to a range of podcasts. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Ben Kentish. But right now, it's time for Ian Dale.
Thanks, Andrew. We are live at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, where Keir Starmer has delivered what I can only call a speech of two halves. The first half was as boring as whatever. The second half was rather fiery, and he really took on Nigel Farage. Now, I have this theory that you shouldn't take Nigel Farage on his own turf. That's exactly what Keir Starmer did. Do you think that strategy will work? That's what we're going to be talking about in the first hour, and get your reaction to what the Prime Minister said this afternoon. In the second hour, it's Cross Question.